For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. The 1992 NFL Draft is considered by many to be the worst draft class in NFL history. And that's saying something. There were 336 players selected that year, and as of this video, not a single one has made it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Defensive back Darren Woodson, drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, is literally the only player in that class to be named an AP First Team All-Pro more than once. For some perspective, the following draft class in 1993 had 7 players accomplish this feat, and the previous draft class in 1991 had 5 such players. Most teams completely whiffed on their draft picks. Of the first 7 players chosen, only one of them lasted more than 4 years with the team that drafted them. Obviously, there were some good players in this class, from the likes of Chester McLaughlin to Jimmy Smith, even if he did nothing with the team that drafted him, to Dale Carter. But finding good players in this class was like trying to find a needle in the haystack. It was almost impossible. And no team whiffed harder at the 1992 NFL Draft than the Philadelphia Eagles, with many people considering this class to be their worst draft class in franchise history. Going down the line, it's not hard to see why. Philly did not have a first-round pick that year, and outside of Mark McMillan, who was drafted in the 10th round and was more known for his time with the Saints than his time with the Eagles, they got no one that you could consider even remotely competent. 3 of their draft picks never played it down in the NFL. Their 3rd-round pick was an offensive lineman named Tommy Jeter, who had 1 sack and started no games. Their 4th-round pick was a running back in Tony Brooks, who had 0 career rushing yards. Their other 4th-round pick was a quarterback named Casey Weldon, who never played it down for the Eagles, and ended his NFL career with 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions. They drafted a receiver who never found the end zone and had 3 catches in his entire career. I kid you not, the Eagles got absolutely nothing out of this draft class. You could throw darts at a board of all the eligible prospects and do a better job at drafting than the Eagles did in 1992. And the centerpiece of that draft for the Eagles? Well, that was an Alabama running back named Siran Stacy, which is always a good sign when your first pick is on a guy whose name was inspired by Saran Wrap. And no, I'm not making that up. Seriously, after getting drafted, Stacy said on his name, "My mom was just looking at a commercial for Saran Wrap. She just spelled it different." So why do I bring him up? Because upon getting drafted in 1992, the Eagles decided to set the bar super duper high, and they compared him to one of the greatest players in the history of the sport. I always love it when guys get drafted and immediately the player or the team compares the guy to a Hall of Famer. We saw that with a comparison made at the 1981 NFL Draft to Hall of Fame wideout John Stallworth, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. We saw that with another comparison made at the 1981 NFL Draft to Hall of Fame wide receiver Lynn Swann, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And we saw that at the 2004 NFL Draft with a comparison to Hall of Fame running back Earl Campbell, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And we have yet another example for you today. Because after the Eagles drafted Stacy in 1992, they proceeded to make an absolutely insane comparison that we need to take a deep dive into today. Because to say that it didn't work out would be putting it lightly. Because this is the story behind Siran Stacy, the Philadelphia Eagles, and what has to be, hands down, the worst player comparison of all time. Before I talk about the insane comparison that head coach Rich Kotite made that left everyone scratching their heads and looked not only ridiculous at the time, but looks even more ridiculous in hindsight, we need some context to understand just who this man right here, Siran Stacy, was, and why the Eagles wanted him so badly. The 1990 season was one of great adversity for Stacy, as after a great 1989 season with the Crimson Tide, where he found the end zone 18 times and had over 1,000 yards rushing, he blew out his knee after one game. the injury was so severe that many thought his football career would be over. However, amazingly enough, thanks to an incredible rehabilitation process, not only did Stacy come back in 1991, but he came back stronger than ever, as the Crimson Tide finished the 1991 season with an 11-1 record, a blockbuster bowl win, and a number 5 ranking in the AP poll, giving them their best season since they won the national championship in 1979. During that season, Stacy ran for 967 yards and 10 touchdowns, and ended the season with over 1,100 yards from scrimmage, as he finished that 1991 campaign second in the SEC in rushing touchdowns, 4th in the conference in rushing yards, and 3rd in the conference in both yards from scrimmage and touchdowns. Stacy had done the unthinkable, and was being talked about as a highly touted NFL prospect. And his film impressed the Philadelphia Eagles, which was good, because Philly desperately needed a running back. In 1991, despite going 10-6 and having a stacked defense, the Eagles missed the playoffs. And while there were many reasons for that, mainly the injury to Randall Cunningham at the start of the season that left Philly with some absolutely anemic quarterback play for the entire year, a big reason was a struggling running game. Out of 28 teams in the league, the Philadelphia Eagles ranked 28th, so dead last, in yards per carry, averaging just 3.1 yards per carry, and they were in the bottom quarter of the league in every major statistical rushing category. There was one game in particular against the San Francisco 49ers where they accrued just 29 yards on the ground, where the running backs combined to have 21 yards on less than 2 yards a carry, and where the longest run by a running back was 5 yards. Obviously, that's not going to get it done. The leading rusher for the Eagles in 1991 was James Joseph, who had 440 yards. He ranked 40th in the league in rushing, and some teams, like the San Diego Chargers, have 3 players who had more rushing yards than the top dog on the Eagles, which is saying something. It was clear going into the 1992 season that the Eagles desperately needed help in the backfield with their running game, and Siran Stacy seemed like he could be the man to provide that much-needed spark and get this offense going on the right track again. With that in mind, the Eagles took a chance on Stacy, drafting the Alabama man in the 2nd round with pick number 48, making him their first draft pick since the Eagles did not have a first-round pick that year, and making him the 5th running back off the board, behind Stanford running back Tommy Bardell to the Cleveland Browns, Southern Miss running back Tony Smith to the Atlanta Falcons, Indiana running back Vaughn Dunbar to the New Orleans Saints, and Florida State running back Amp Lee to the San Francisco 49ers. More on him in just a bit. And when the Eagles ended up drafting Stacy, it's safe to say that head coach Rich Kotite was excited about what Stacy could do and what he could bring to the table. Things started off innocent enough. Kotite started off by saying, "Stacy gives us the type of back we don't quite have here. We've got some big, strong running backs, but I think that with this kid's style, he's going to make an impact here." Alright, nothing crazy about that. That's just generic coach speak. We have running backs who can bowl you over, but we don't really have a speed guy who will get you with his burst in the second level. And Stacy brings that. He's a home run hitter. Nothing crazy there. He then added, "He's a bright kid who certainly can take it the distance. He has great vision and great acceleration. He is a very smooth runner." Okay, so Kotite really likes this guy, and it seems like Stacy can do it all, but nothing out of the ordinary yet. Basically, Kotite is saying that the man is a home run threat every time he touches the ball, and is super fast, and is a unique runner, and that's why they drafted him. And if that's where Kotite stopped, then let's be honest, this is a complete non-story, and more than 3 decades later, we're not talking about it. This is just generic coach speak and praise about a draft pick, which everyone does. But like the Energizer Bunny, he kept going. Because then, Kotite had to say, I kid you not, he reminds me a lot of Marcus Allen. He was a 4.7 something, and he runs much the same way. Also, he's an excellent receiver, runs good routes, and we can do a lot with him. Seriously, according to Rich Kotite, this man right here, Siran Stacy, was Marcus Allen 2.0. Siran Stacy was being compared, completely out of nowhere and completely unprompted, to Marcus Allen. Because of course he was. Of course Kotite just had to go there. Okay, so for those of you who don't know who this man right here, Marcus Allen, is, allow me to explain. Marcus Allen is considered by just about everyone to be one of the greatest running backs in the history of the National Football League. And he was so good that he got inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame on the very first ballot. In 1982, he got drafted by the Los Angeles Raiders, and he made an immediate impact, leading the league in rushing touchdowns and yards from scrimmage while being named the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year. He followed that up in 1983 with another 1,000-yard season and a dominant performance at Super Bowl 18, in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, where he won the MVP of that game, had one of the most iconic runs in the history of the sport, and guided the Raiders to what remains their final Super Bowl title to date. In 1985, he led the league with 1,759 rushing yards, and had a whopping 2,314 yards from scrimmage, setting the NFL record at the time for most yards from scrimmage in a season, in a record that would not be broken until Barry Sanders did it in 1997 with the Detroit Lions. So at the time of the draft, Allen held the all-time single-season record. For his efforts in 1985, he was not only named an AP First-Team All-Pro, but he was named the AP Offensive Player of the Year and the MVP. And by the time his illustrious career ended, he had 12,243 rushing yards, 123 rushing touchdowns, and 17,654 yards from scrimmage, with 144 combined rushing and receiving touchdowns. To give you an idea of how freaking good that is, at the time he hung up his cleats, he was 6th all-time in rushing touchdowns. He was 2nd all-time in rushing and receiving touchdowns, only trailing Jerry Rice in that category. He was number 1 all-time in rushing touchdowns, as one of just 5 players to run for 100 touchdowns in a career. And he was number 2 all-time in scrimmage yards, only behind Walter Payton, regarded by many as the greatest running back in the history of the sport. I think you get the idea. Marcus Allen was really freaking good. And yet, despite how good this man right here was, and despite how he etched his name in pro football history and was well on his way to the Pro Football Hall of Fame by this point, Rich Kotite felt the need to compare his second-round draft pick to him. Move over, Marcus Allen. Siran Stacy is coming for your crown. It's enough pressure as it is playing in Philadelphia. Now, you've got your coach comparing you to Marcus freaking Allen for some inexplicable reason. And it stinks because Stacy was pretty level-headed about the whole thing. He didn't even watch the draft, because he was a guest speaker at a church in his hometown in Alabama. He said your typical draft speak about how grateful he was and how excited he was to get to work, saying, "I know I can come in and do a lot of good things for a really good football team." He had his head on his shoulders and was just trying to be grateful and realistic. And then, here comes his coach saying, "Here we go, we got the next Marcus Allen." So, good job there. I'm sure everyone was real thrilled with those remarks. Oh, and for the cherry on top, Rich Kotite then said on this man right here, Siran Stacy, "As far as starting and things like that, I don't like to make those kinds of statements." I mean, obviously, we don't want to put the cart before the horse or anything like that. Sure, the man's the next Hall of Famer. He's Marcus Allen 2.0, but let's be real. He's just a rookie. He might not be starting right away. I don't want to say that. I absolutely love that. You don't want to say that Siran Stacy is going to be good enough to be a starting running back, but you have no problem comparing him to Marcus freaking Allen. This just in, Caleb Williams isn't guaranteed the starting job in Chicago, but head coach Matt Eberflus went on the record and said that he's the next Joe Montana. Assuming they don't trade the pick, the Arizona Cardinals are going to start Marvin Harrison Jr. right away, But head coach Jonathan Gannon compared the man to Jerry Rice. Absolutely genius. Then again, Kotite isn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, and never has been. I've done plenty of dumb decisions episodes on him, so if you want to learn more about his stupidity, including a game where he declined a penalty on 3rd down while on offense so that he could punt the ball away, click the card in the upper right corner. And I also love the fact that Kotite admitted that Stacy was not their top choice. The man that the Eagles actually wanted went 2 picks earlier, as with pick number 46, the San Francisco 49ers, wanting to bolster their running game, chose Florida State running back Amp Lee. So let me get this straight. You're comparing Siran Stacy to a Hall of Famer, saying that the man is the next Marcus Allen, and reminds you a lot of Marcus Allen. And yet, he wasn't your top choice? That's somehow even stupider than the comments made. If Siran Stacy reminded you of Marcus Allen, and yet you wanted Amp Lee, who did Amp Lee remind you of? A literal Greek god? It's like the mystery box. You can have Marcus Allen, or you could have whatever's in the mystery box. It could be anything. It could even be Marcus Allen. That's like if the New England Patriots say that they really want Jaden Daniels, and they have him graded above Drake May, but he goes number 2 to the Washington Commanders. So the Pats settle for May with pick number 3, and they say that even though May wasn't their first choice, they think that May is identical to Peyton Manning. Nothing about that makes any sense. The logic employed is absolutely baffling on just about every level, and I hope you can understand why. I honestly don't know what's worse, comparing a draft pick to a Hall of Famer, or making that comparison and still not having him atop your positional rankings and saying that you wanted to take someone else. But okay, as crazy as these comments by Kotite were, maybe Stacy made up for it and proved him right by playing well. Maybe Siran Stacy could live up to the hype and the expectations set by his coach. Maybe he was the next Marcus Allen. So with that being said, I've been working on this film for a really long time that I'm ready to share to the world. This one is called Every Yard Gained by Siran Stacy. Keep in mind, Marcus Allen ended his career with over 17,000 yards from scrimmage. So if Stacy really is the next Allen, this video could be 7 or 8 hours long, so I apologize in advance. With that being said, let's take a look. Every single yard gained by Siran Stacy in his NFL career. Roll the tape. That's right. 0, zilch, nada, nothing, goose egg, 0 yards for his entire career. The man compared to Marcus Allen didn't even so much as get a carry in the NFL or with the Philadelphia Eagles. And it wasn't due to injury, but rather just because he stunk. He played sporadically on special teams, and that was about it. Marcus Allen touched the ball 3,609 times in his career. Siran Stacy touched it 0 times. Marcus Allen had 12,243 career rushing yards. Siran Stacy had 0 rushing yards. Marcus Allen had 587 catches. Siran Stacy had 0 catches. Marcus Allen had 17,654 yards from scrimmage. Siran Stacy had 0 yards from scrimmage. Marcus Allen had 123 rushing touchdowns. Siran Stacy had 0 rushing touchdowns. And Marcus Allen had 144 total touchdowns. Siran Stacy had 0 total touchdowns. Other than that, yeah, they were the exact same player. Kotite really nailed that comparison. If you have a YouTube channel with 1 subscriber, statistically speaking, you are closer to Mr. Beast from a percentage standpoint than Siran Stacy was to Marcus Allen, because at least you're not dividing by 0. Maybe by the next Marcus Allen, he meant Marcus Allen today, as in a 64-year-old running back, because otherwise, I've got absolutely nothing. This was just embarrassing. Now, to be fair to Siran Stacy, after flaming out with this team behind me right here, the Philadelphia Eagles, and doing nothing in the NFL, he did have a pretty decent career in NFL Europe. He played for the Scottish Claymores throughout the second half of the 1990s, and was one of the top running backs in NFL Europe, as he ran for over 2,300 yards and 16 touchdowns during his time overseas. And in 1996, he helped the Scottish Claymores win the World Bowl, which was the title game, to win their first and only title in NFL Europe history. So he did have a decent career in NFL Europe. But in terms of his time in the NFL and being the next Marcus Allen, yeah, not even remotely close. So just as a word of advice for any front office members or head coaches watching this video, when you draft a player, awesome. You should be excited about getting said player. No one is saying otherwise. In fact, it'd be really stupid and would look ridiculous if you drafted a guy and you didn't like him, because what's the point of drafting him then? But there's a major difference between talking about what he does well and why you like him so much, and comparing him right off the bat without playing a single snap to a Hall of Famer, especially when said player wasn't even your first choice. If you're comparing your wide receiver to Steve Largent, not a smart move. If you're comparing your tight end to Tony Gonzalez, not a smart move. And if you're comparing your running back to Marcus Allen, as in one of the greatest to ever do it, you might want to reevaluate things and how you speak and how you make comparisons. Because in 1992, it's safe to say that especially when it came to the Marcus Allen comparison, Stacy did not have it going on. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.